talking about the food, like what about the marketing problem of there's just saturate, you go in the grocery store and I want to hide under the cart because it's just like, what's real, what's not, what's really organic, what's really steel cut, what's really is steel cut the same as regular steel cut, but it says organic, but is that for so they can up the price?
There's several sort of golden rules that I talk about with patients. One is, as much as possible, stick to whole foods. When you see something, was it growing on a plant or a tree, or is it a whole food, or has it been processed? So sticking to whole foods as much as possible. I think the other thing that's very relevant, specifically with processed foods, is the carbohydrate to fiber ratio. And it's sort of like a poor man's glycemic index. So, you can look at just the total amount of sugar, and that would be a very good way to figure out how many carbs you're having. And you can obviously speak to that better than I, as it pertains to how complex the carbohydrate is and how quickly that carbohydrate gets change to sugar in your system. The carb to fiber ratio is the best way to do that. So when you look at the ingredients label, it'll say total carb 21, let's say. It'll say total fiber 3. So the carb over the fiber ratio, 21 to 3, is 7. The lower, the better. And, so the best would be a carb to fiber ratio of 1. But that's pure fiber. That means everything that's celery has a carb to fiber ratio of 1. That's going to be impossible to find. But for example, Wonder Bread has a carb to fiber ratio of infinity because it has 0 fiber. But there's like Ezekiel bread, Joseph's lavash. There's that prisoner, like Mike Ike's, or there's some prisoner bread. Like it's based literally, I think this was the ingredients that he had access to in prison, and he started to make bread and it's taken over. They'll have carb to fiber ratios of 4. And even in that situation, bread should not become a foundational part of your diet. And you can use that carb to fiber ratio for other processed foods as well, like pastas. There are now like chickpea pastas and lentil pastas. And oftentimes, so one of those things that the food companies try to fool you is, organic, plant-based, right? But when you look at the carb to fiber ratio, it's 20. And of course it's appetizing, and of course it tastes great because it's sugar and disguised with spices. And so the carb to fiber ratio I found eminently helpful. Some of it for me is the relationship with food. It's diabetics are in a quandary in many ways, because in some ways what you eat is potentially what's going to make you sick, right? And trying to refrain that as food being an empowering thing, food being something that promotes health. So I look forward to when I can add parsley, dill, cilantro, fresh herbs to whatever I'm making. So I've developed these relationships, like with herbs, that I know that they have anti-cancer causing abilities. I sort of portray magical powers to these foods that, put on your, invisible ring or something like that. Like some of these foods. And because I study this stuff, I know which foods have some theoretical anti-cancer effects. And for me, equating those with the food helps me to then create a construct where I look forward to eating them. They make me feel empowered. They make me feel good, hopeful, so on and so forth. And, it's a psychological game, but it works for me.